Hi everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to So it's no secret that I took a long break, about like half a year, but I still read quite a bit. In total, I read about 30 something books. So I thought I would do this sort of big wrap up just to catch you up on all of the books that I read in the last 5 almost 6 months. I know it's gonna be a lot, so this might be long. I tried my best to group the books in such a way that made sense, so it's not gonna be in the order that I read them. In the description, I will have the timestamps. I guess let's just get this started because this is gonna be a long one. Prologue, 24-hour readathon. First four books that I'm gonna share, I'm not really gonna talk about because I did a 24-hour readathon and I uploaded that vlog and all of my thoughts are in there. I read Kindred, graphic novel adaptation by Octavia E. Butler, Decada Stenta by Lualhati Bautista, Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney, and Idol Burning by Rin Osami. I gave them stars. So yeah, if you want to know my thoughts about this book and you want to see me read it, then I will leave a link in the description box to that readathon. Chapter 1, Fantasy. I'm a big fantasy reader, so this is probably the biggest chunk in this whole wrap up. First one is quite obvious if you've been following me on Instagram or BookTube, is the Hunger Games series, the Hunger Games Trilogy, the OG dystopian trilogy for YA. But I've never really read it and watched it intentionally. Me and my friend Pam from Pam Shenanigans did a Hunger Games read along where we read each month a Hunger Games book, we watched the movie, and then we did a live show on it.
It sounds like the most organized read-along ever.
What did I think about the Hunger Games trilogy? Overall, the trilogy itself is solid. I can see why a lot of people talk about these books as if it's like the blueprint for YA dystopian because it has really all of the makings of a good dystopian story. Honestly, the Hunger Games did it so well. I gave the Hunger Games 4.75 stars and Catching Fire and Mockingjay 4 stars. I think it's because the first book, there's a lot of like world building, setting the tone, and it did such a great job. There were a lot of lines there that was so hard hitting. I specifically remember this commentary where Katniss was looking at this food in the capital, very intricate, very fancy food that is definitely a far cry from the food that she eats in District 12. And she was just thinking, I would have to hunt for like 5 days straight. I would have to trade this and this to get this ingredient, and I would have to sell this. I would have to forage this just so I could collect enough ingredients to make this plate of food that they're eating in one meal. That's a very like apt depiction of the differences between the rich and the poor, basically. Just super simple analogy, but it's so hard hitting. Even now, I kind of feel goosebumps thinking about that scene. That is like my absolute favorite, I guess, analogy that they did in the whole trilogy. I will remember that for the rest of my life, I feel like. A series that I also continued and finished in this period is the Caraval trilogies. I read Legendary and Finale. So I read Caraval last year in December and I continued it this year and I finished the series. What do I think about this? I still love the Caraval world. The whole setting, I adore it. I think it's well made. I think the whole whimsical fairy tale and the kind of dark fairy tale nature of it is so cool and it's really well written, well done. I really love that world. I was like lukewarm about Caraval. I like Legendary. I think this is the strongest book in the trilogy, mostly because we get a little bit more world building, just all of the things about the fate and that deck of destiny, and then we meet some characters. I know you all know who we met in Legendary that we just love. Legendary, I feel like all of the twists and turns, the plot reveals itself, I really enjoyed. So yeah, I think it was better than the other two books, primarily because there's like this good balance between world building, the characters that we're following, the actual plot that's happening, and the final sort of like twist is really satisfying. But yeah, 3.75 stars for this one. As for finale, however, I love all of the new characters that we explored, but I feel like the plot itself and the logic of the plot is kind of shaky. I think it could have been thought about more. It wasn't believable. I was just looking for a bit more logic to the things that I do, and I didn't get that with finale. So finale was 2.25 for me, which is not great. I still love the world, and I was happy to get some closure on some of the questions that I had. I love the dynamic of the different characters, but I just wish the story itself made sense. And then the next, I guess, subcategory in this fantasy chapter is dragons. Yes, I did read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I gave that 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I mean, is it the best writing in the world? No. Is it like the most like tight plot? No. But is it enjoyable? Was I happy to read it? Did I not let go of the book until I finished reading it? 100% yes. So yeah, I think there's like the enjoyment level. This book is like a 10 for me. I love the world that they created, the whole thing with the military school, the different quadrants, the drag, the hierarchy. I really love that. I really love immersing myself into a world that is not necessarily like well created, but more of like immersive. If it's immersive, if the setting itself is something that I'm imagining myself in, then that's a win for me. The whole romance aspect of it was fun. There was a lot of like angsty feelings in there, which I quite enjoy. Final twist at the end. I kind of saw it coming, which is not a problem for me, but it was very satisfying the way that it happened. And I am excited for the next book, which is Iron Flame. I already have it on hold in my library. That is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So I read Fourth Wing. I wanted to read more dragons. And thankfully, I saw this reel by Carrie Can Read where she recommended this series, the Aurelian Cycle Trilogy. And I love this series. First book is Fireborne. I gave this one 4.5 stars because I really enjoyed one, the whole setting, and two, I really enjoyed the focus on the whole politics of this thing and how everything is moving, like all the different parts of this world, which is reminiscent of when I read Jade City. It did such a great job of balancing the plot, the characters, the world building, the romance, I guess, and I was just invested. I read this almost back to back to back. Did I even say what this books were about? No, I did not. Going back, are following Lee and a girl named Annie. They grew up in the same orphanage. Lee's family died during the rebellion, where his entire family was killed because they were actually dragon riders. They're kind of like feudal lords. He was actually one of the sons in that family. The leader of the rebellion gave him mercy and let him live. He hid his identity in the orphanage and called himself Lee from then on. So Annie knows him as Lee, this orphan. Now Annie's family died because triarchy basically killed his family as a punishment for hiding some of the crops. They have to give a percentage of the crops that they grow. She was spared sort of like as a witness to the whole thing, and they both meet in the orphanage. Now, as they grew up, they were able to take an exam which allowed them to become dragon riders. That is like the premise of this whole story, and this book has heavier themes than Fourth Wing. So if you're reading this because you wanted the same feeling as Fourth Wing, you're not exactly gonna get it. So there's a lot more focus on the politics. There's not a lot of this cool stuff. I highly recommend this one. I gave Flamefall, the second book, 4.25 stars, and Furysong, final book, 5 stars. The ending of the book was well thought out. I wouldn't say it was perfect, but I was really satisfied by how the book ended. And while I still wanted to read more about these characters and this world, I'm sort of happy that I ended it where they did. That is the Aurelian Cycle by Rosaria Munda. Highly recommend the book. Another series that I read during this time is the Crowns of Nyaxia Nightborn Duet duology. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. what do I think about this book? I really enjoyed the first book. I gave that 4.25 stars. So yeah, I really love tournament and books, and this one is set in the world where there are vampires. So there are different factions of vampires, and they are clashing and vying for the position as the leader of all the vampires. I'm forgetting the terms, but there's this event that happens once every how many years, and you can compete to win, and when you win you get a wish from Nyaxia, the goddess of vampires. Like, she created the vampires basically. We are following the main character. She is actually a human in this vampire kingdom. King of the vampires adopted her. She wanted to join this tournament so that she could get a wish from Nyaxia. I really enjoyed the first book. I think the whole thing about the different factions, as you can see here, the theme is that if you create a good world that I can immerse myself in, I would love it. Like, the whole scene setting, world building is a very big factor of my enjoyment in the book. I love the romance aspect of it as well. The whole hate to love, or maybe enemies to lovers. I don't know what the difference is between the two, but yeah, I really enjoyed the first one. The second book though, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, I gave 3 stars. I didn't quite enjoy this one. A lot more fan servicey than I wanted to be. It feels like it was kind of just forced to continue the romance plotline that we had in the first book. A lot of things didn't make sense, like logic wise. Forgettable sequel for me. This whole series actually is like a 6-book series. There's like 3 duologies within the 6 books. So I don't know if I'm going to continue. That is Crowns of Nyaxia, Nightborn, Duet. Finally, I'm going to talk about 2 fantasies. One of them is a second book in the series, and another one is just a standalone novella. So for the novella, I read Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. I gave it 4 stars. It didn't disappoint me. Y'all know that Jade City is like my number 1 fantasy series. Maybe even my number 1 favorite book right now. Really excited to read a new book from her. This one, because it's a novella, it's like 100 plus pages. She was able to pack in a lot of like world building in such a short amount of pages, and I really appreciated that. Plot wise, it wasn't really there. Maybe it wasn't really the focus, I think, of the book, where it's really more of like a character study, because the whole thing that happened felt like,
What? Really? That's it? That's how they're gonna go down?
if she developed this in full novel, it would have been amazing. But as it is, as a novella, it was a 4 stars for me, mostly because of the world building and the whole character study exploration that we did in the beginning. And finally, the last fantasy book that I read is City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. It was a slog to get through. It was so boring. I was bored in City of Bones. This one, I think I was even more bored. I don't know how that happened. I'm happy that I read more about this world. Mostly, I'm rating the first Mortal Instruments series as like a required reading. But I'm excited to finally move on to Infernal Devices. I have read City of Glass. I'll talk about that in my October wrap up. But yeah, I'm excited to move on to the next one, because Infernal Devices is what everyone seems to love, and I just wanna move away from this first series because it was so boring. So yeah, that was City of Ashes, Cassandra Clare, 2 stars. I'm not even gonna talk about it more. Chapter 2, Romance. I hesitate to say that it's romance because it really isn't. It's more of like a fantasy fiction with a romance aspect. So I'm gonna talk about it first. It is The Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. And I love this book. I don't know why I waited so long to read it. It was so fucking good. The writing is so decadent. I could feel the emotions of Constanta, the character that we're following, and the lines are so hard-hitting. I love this one. It was so satisfying to read, and I could not put it down, and I see the hype, guys. I see the hype. It is so good. So good. 5 stars. Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Read it. Read it. Of course, for romance, you noticed by now, I'm reading the Off Campus and Briar U series. So I finished Off Campus by reading The Legacy by L. Kennedy. I gave this one 3.25 stars. It was cute. The Legacy is kind of like a collection of epilogues for the first 4 books. Because if you don't know, in Off Campus series, it's like a hockey romance, and we are following different couples per book. Being back with the characters that I really enjoyed, especially Garrett and Dean. I really enjoyed them and their stories. It was fun reading about them again. Was it good in terms of the writing. It's very fan servicey. And then I started the Briar U series. It's still set in the same world, and we are following other hockey players. I read The Chase and then The Risk, so the first two books in Briar U. I gave The Chase 3 stars. I really enjoyed this one because the main guy was quite different. The characters in this book, Fitzy and Summer, you've seen them in the off-campus series. So Summer is a sister of one of the couples in the off-campus series, while Fitzy he's like a side character in the off-campus series. He's one of the hockey teammates, but he did show up a lot in the off-campus, so you kind of know him already. And I think that played a part in why I really enjoyed The Chase. In off-campus, they're all this like hotshots, sex gods, super popular people. While Fitzy is popular, a lot of people like him because obviously in El Kennedy's world, all hockey players are like gorgeous people. But yeah, he's like more of the introvert. He likes to draw and make games. He doesn't really, party. And then Summer is just like, think like Legally Blonde. That's sort of the description for Summer. And yeah, they were cute. And then finally, I read The Risk by Al Kennedy. I gave this one 2.5 stars. I think it was boring in a sense that the characters felt like they were duplicates of other characters with just a little variation kind of thing. It didn't feel original to me. The main guy was kind of like boring for me. It felt like we were just copy-pasting characters at this point. I read Mile High by Liz Domford. I gave this one 3 stars. I know this is part of a series. I don't know if I'm going to read it again. It's more of like a guilty pleasure kind of read. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It was definitely like I have to suspend my disbelief a lot with this book. But it was quite enjoyable. It was okay. We were following Stevie, who is a flight attendant for this hockey team. So she is a flight attendant for their private plane, and she gets into this tiff with one of the players who's like a very obnoxious person. They get to know each other, blah, blah, blah. Mile High. Next one, I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I know I like to say that Ali Hazelwood's characters are just the same, but I actually think in Love Theoretically it was quite different. It felt quite different. I gave this one 3 stars. It was enjoyable. Still has a lot of like cringy Ali Hazelwood writing, but it was fun. I think everyone and their mothers know what this is about, but yeah. Love Theoretically, Ali Hazelwood. The next one I read is the second book in a series. I read Ricochet by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is the second book in the Addicted series. I loved Addicted to You, which is the first book. It's a shorter book. It felt like a novella. We're just following, what is her name? The girl here as she tries to cope with the ending of Addicted to You. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, how she's trying to become better and get the control of her addiction, and I guess a lot more conversation on the nuances of her addiction because she's addicted to sex, which is quite difficult to talk about because a lot of people just would think that you're just promiscuous. So she's trying to figure that part out. Oh, is that a spoiler? I think that's spoiler, so scratch that. So yeah, Ricochet, I gave this one 3 stars. Okay, the last, I guess, set of romance book that I read the Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. So this is like super popular dark romance duology, Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. It's basically like a stalker romance kind of situation. In Haunting Adeline, we have this girl who moves into a manor, I would say, into a house owned by a family relative that has passed away. So the house is quite old, quite dilapidated. At first, it was giving this horror book vibes where it was describing this dilapidated manor where she's hearing things and she thinks there's like things in the walls. It was very horror-esque vibe, which I really enjoyed. And then we get introduced to this guy called Z. Z sees Adeline as she was in like a book event. She's a writer. He basically falls in love at first sight. So he basically stalks her, harms / kills anyone who lays a hand on her, anyone that she might be interested in. Basically, he threatens her that, if she tries to go out with other people, they're gonna suffer, blah, blah, blah. It's like, can't help but like Z and the things that he do. His methods are very definitely questionable, but I guess he's doing, I don't want to spoil, but yeah, I can see why everyone loves Z. I love Z. And maybe I should go to therapy. The second book in this duology is Hunting Adeline which I did not like as much as I did Haunting. Haunting Adeline I gave 4 stars. This one I gave 3 stars. I really liked the first half of it where Adeline was in this situation that she couldn't get out of. I'm trying not to spoil anything, and we're sort of following her story, her experiences, her trauma. But then the second half of the book, when she's got out of that situation, it did not make sense. Like logic out the window. Nothing made sense. We're just here for the vibes. We're just here for the romance and the action. The first half was so strong. If it went on with that level of writing and storytelling, I would have given it like maybe even 5 stars. But because of the second half of the book, which was 100%, I feel like it's fan service, I had to give it 3 stars. So yeah, that was Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. Chapter 3, Thriller. I read thriller quite a bit. It's a way for me to get momentum with reading. For some reason, in this entire period, I only read 2 thrillers. So the first one was Sadie by Courtney Summers. This was a well-recommended book. I actually listened to it in audiobook format, which is something that I don't do a lot of. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. In this book, we are following the story of a girl who was missing, and her story is covered by this podcast. First, everyone thought that, she was dead, but then they saw like little crumbs of information. I think it was a really good sort of nail-biting kind of thriller where you're really at the edge of your seat trying to figure out what is going on. I really like it when thrillers where I don't see the plot twist coming, but once I know of the plot twist, in hindsight, see all of the breadcrumbs that led to that plot twist. I hate it when the twist comes out of nowhere. It's like a very random thing. That was Sadie by Courtney Summers. The next book I read is Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. I actually saw this book in Kat from Kat and Angelico's vlog, and her reactions were like top tier, so I was really curious about this book. So in this book, it opens with this scene of this girl who is held captive in this basement. She's been there for a long time, but she escapes and she goes back into this town. And then after she escapes, we get a flashback into the past. So in the past, this woman goes missing, and then suddenly Delilah, the woman that we just saw in the sort of intro, also goes missing along with the mother, and then we follow the trail of what happened, who kidnapped them and who killed them, and eventually that case goes cold. So now that Delilah has returned to the present time, so she's very traumatized and it's hard for people to get closer. They're trying to figure out what really happened to her, and yeah, it was just that whole crazy thing of trying to figure out, okay, what did happen in the past. But then as we progress further, something just doesn't add up. That's where the story begins, I guess. This was like a whole nother level of like twists and turns, and so fun to read. At the same time, I wasn't as sold with the conclusion. Very, very fun to read, and I am definitely going to be checking out other Mary Kubica books because I feel like she could write a really good thriller. I really recommend this one. 3.5 stars, mostly just because I couldn't get on board with the way things ended. Chapter 4, Everything Else. Basically, this is a catch-all for all the other books that I read that did not fit into the other chapters. I read How High We Go in the Dark by Sekiya Nagamatsu. This is, I guess, a literary fiction about this world where a deadly virus ravages the whole world, and we're sort of like exploring how the world has changed, how people have changed, how times have changed because of that incident. It's very difficult to read if you aren't comfortable with books set in like a pandemic, because that is essentially what this book is set in, and it's not a continuous plot. It's kind of like a collection of stories of different points in time, different people that we're following, just basically exploring how this catastrophic event has affected them and how they are coping with it. I really loved it. It's a very hard-hitting book. There's lots of like themes that we explore in here about grief, hope, suffering, survival, and just resilience. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Very hard-hitting, very difficult to read though in terms of like emotion. So yeah, maybe you should check trigger warnings before doing that. Another book that I read that's in the lit fic space is Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. This book is weird. This book is weird. It's kind of like a story about food, about the diet culture, and we are following a character who is essentially obsessed with calorie restriction. She goes to therapy for it. It consumes her entire life. So definitely trigger warnings for that. She meets this person who is just living life and doesn't really give a fuck about all of that. And just sort of like their dynamic and things that they hold dear to them and how it has affected their views on relationships, on self-worth. This one is also a sapphic novel. I don't think the romance or I guess the relationship is the focus in this book. It's really more of like a character study of the people that we're following here. Gave this one 3.5 stars. I feel like the themes that I explored are really important, a bit confusing. Maybe it's just me. That is Milk-Fed by Melissa Broder. I also read All's Well by Mona Awad. This one is more of like a magical realism kind of book. It's very interesting. I gave this one 4 stars. So in this book, we are following this character. She used to be like a theater performer. Right now, she is a school teacher director for the plays. Unfortunately, suffered an accident during the time that she was performing, which morphed into this chronic illness that she has. She's always in pain. She's kind of addicted to opioid. Something happens, something weird and mystical happens where all the pain is gone, and then she starts experiencing life without the pain. I think this book talks about chronic pain really well. The whole exploration and the whole description of the pain that she's feeling and how it's affecting her day-to-day life and how other people dismiss her pain because it's not visible to the eye. It's just something that she feels and people dismiss that. It's very hard-hitting. Definitely trigger warnings if you suffer from chronic pain and this is something that you're not mentally prepared to deal with, because it does go in depth and it really dives into the struggles that she has both physically, obviously mentally, and emotionally, and how this thing has basically invaded her entire life and prevented her from living her life. I think it's best to read this book without knowing too much about the whole plot, because the plot is not the point. It definitely adds to the themes, but it's not the point. So yeah. All's Well by Mona Awad. And then I also read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I gave this one 3.75 stars. I think it was a fun and entertaining book to read. It felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. I do think that it was too heavy-handed. That could be the point of the whole book, but at the same time, it's kind of like tiring to read because of that. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this book except that it was a good read. I wouldn't say it's the best. Yeah, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. The next one is not really a book. It's more of like a 3-page essay. It's The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, a story by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's kind of like a philosophical paper, but I think I would be interested in really diving deep into this concept of a world. It's a very dystopian world. Don't know if there's like an expanded version of this, but yeah, I just read this 3-4 page philosophical essay kind of thing. So yeah, it's so hard to categorize that one. The next one that I actually listened to is You're That Bitch by Bretman Rock. This is Bretman Rock's memoir, and it was really entertaining to listen to. Bretman narrated the book, so it has all of those extra flair. This one is a good one to listen to, like when you're on a long drive. I listened to it on the bus while I was going home from the beach, which was quite fun. That was like a 4-hour bus ride, so definitely worth it to listen to this book during that trip. It made it so much more fun. Yeah, You're That Bitch by Bretman Rock. So the next one I read is, I guess it's like a contemporary YA romance kind of thing. I read If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. I gave this one 2.25 stars. I really did not enjoy it. I think I'm just really over the whole petty high school drama. I'm just so far removed from that doesn't really interest me anymore. I don't know why I read it. I think I just saw it on BookTube and just thought, maybe I'll just read it. This book starts off, there was like a car crash that happened, and then we flash back to the story of those two people. It kind of gave normal people vibes where they're like in each other's lives for so long, but then things just don't work out, but then they're still in each other's orbit, blah blah blah. So yeah, I was just okay with it. 2.25 stars. Nothing really much to say about it. So yeah, that was If You Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. The last book, or rather manga, that I'm going to be sharing with you is Spy X Family Volume 6. I gave this one 3.25 stars. Maybe I'll just stop reading this and just watch the adaptation because I think the adaptation is quite cute. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm just reading this whenever I want to read something, but I can't decide what I want to read. So I just go into this manga just because it's like a cozy, funny kind of read. So yeah, that was a lot. Talking about 30 plus books is too much. I don't want to do this ever again, which means I need to be consistent with monthly wrap up. Those were the books that I've read recently. There were some 5-star books in there, which is really good, and then there's some low 2 stars in there, but it's fine. It's all fine. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books that I've read and you have thoughts about them, let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, I'm happy that you're here and thank you for hanging out with me and talking about all these books with me. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!